Today I'm going to walk you through a beautiful panorama. It's actually 8 images that will be stitched together. It's taken on the Isle of Skye at a place called Sligachan, and it's a magnificent view towards the Cuillins just before the sun sets. So you've got gorgeous colours right across the landscape, and I'll show you how I put this together. So taking our 8 images that we have in a folder, you can see that they're quite dark, so I have deliberately underexposed these because of the dusk. We take them into Photoshop, open Photoshop, and as I do this I'm going to show you, first of all we take them into the RAW converter. That's Adobe Camera Raw. We have a film strip of 8 images. We select all and then we merge to panorama. You can see clearly with this first image how underexposed that I shot this set of images. The reason being I wanted all the detail in those beautiful clouds. You can see even more clearly now how that there is a lot of detail in those clouds because of the underexposure. Interestingly, I'm working in cylindrical today, and I don't need to take the boundary warp out too much. That's just about right there. Be aware too that whatever you click on, either spherical, cylindrical or perspective, if you leave it in that one, that's the next one that will work. And if your next set of images is not perspective, you cannot open the panorama merge preview. It's a little problem that Photoshop hasn't told us about. Okay, so we can save that PNG file into our folder and we can work on this in Camera Raw with our sliders. So as normal, I first look at the shadows, the highlights and then the whites. Maybe a little bit of clarity is needed. That's just about enough there. And of course I'm going to bump the vibrance up. It's a beautiful picture and I want to bring as much detail as I can out of this. Working the temperature now, watching my tint very carefully and warming it up just enough because it is towards dusk. And now I work my exposure and contrast levels very carefully. You can see how I've brought that out. The foreground particularly, quite a bit lighter, which makes the sky too light. So I'm going to add my lovely gradient tool. And again, I'm going to watch the temperature just on the gradient in the sky. A little bit more warmth. I start my aeroplane way out of the picture just to get that lovely soft gradient coming into the sky. Okay, I'll click off that. That's just where I want it. Final some adjustments again to the exposure and contrast of the overall image. Then into saturation, looking at all my warm tones and a little bit of aquas there. The green's not doing anything, so I leave that alone. And I want to bias it towards the warm yellows. Not so much the yellows, leave them on the green, but the oranges. Just enough because there's that gorgeous light over the Cuillins in the background. When I'm happy with that, I then open the image. You can see that that's ready to go. Now this is a huge file. It's 8 images stitched on the vertical with a 30% overlap. Camera Raw format is now reading that and it will drop it into Photoshop for us. And there we are. Okay, I'm looking at the overall image now and I want to get rid of some detail that are not, shouldn't be there. For instance, there's some pipe work in that, and also I see that it's a little bit off level, so I'm going to actually make this image exactly level. I don't like the way it falls off to the left side. So using the ruler tool, we've straightened that now, flatten it, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can fill it in. First of all, we can lasso that and we can fill it. Content aware in the normal mode at 100%. and that will select that area and fill it. There's also another way I can show you here too. We can take our brush tool and we can just fill in the areas that are white. And again, that fuzzy logic will fill the white part with the image that's next to it. So there's two ways to do that, and they both work quite nicely. Okay, as mentioned, I want to work on this area over here on the right. So zooming in, I then take the lasso tool and I very carefully select the area that I don't want in my photograph. So first of all, it's this brick wall and that awful ugly water pipe there. We don't want that in our frame. Carefully outline the area. Then we go into the fill. Again, looking at content aware normal and 100%, click on that and you'll see that, okay, 90% right. There's just a couple little areas here that we need to fix up. So getting our clone tool, normal 100%, we'll select some areas nearby and we'll carefully clone in the detail here so that we will not see it in our panographic photograph. Here we go. That's working quite nicely. And we can select the content aware brush tool and take out some other areas that we don't want in the photograph. Here, there's a great big area of lichen that's actually cold white and probably dead in real life. We don't want that in our photograph. It's a great big white area. Again, taking the clone tool, we can look for some rocks nearby and copy those in, and your photograph's going to look beautiful in that area as well. It's just a question of selecting and being a little bit artistic about what you're looking at. And we can continue through here. There's a couple of other white spots that I'm looking at now that I want to fix up. Content aware brush tool here again, and we get rid of those white lichen spots. Okay, moving through the photograph, there's another pipe. We'll get rid of that. Get rid of that. Now we have this area here, this white foam. It actually is an eye magnet in the beginning of our frame, right down there at the bottom. Carefully selecting the outline, we go to Fill, Content Aware 100%, click on that, and watch this. It'll most likely get rid of it all. There it is. Very good. There's just a couple of copy areas in there that we'll just carefully brush out with our Content Aware brush. And here we go. We'll just get rid of those bubbles because they're multiplied across there on the other side. A couple more spots. And I think there's a couple of white spots here that I don't want on the left side in the foliage. And probably up there in the rocks. I'll get to those in a moment. I can see them. That's it. A little bit of white spots there that we don't want in our frame either. So that's looking pretty good. There's just a couple more here that we want to get rid of. That's looking much better. So we've got rid of all our eye magnets. We've got rid of the man-made stuff that we don't want in this beautiful panorama. And now we're going to do some interesting brush work using the brush tool in the vivid light mode. And we've got to be very careful with our opacity. I like to keep it under 10% or around 10%, depending on what colour I'm putting in. So first of all, it's these beautiful warm creamy tones that are lighting up the afternoon light there on the mountains, the Cuillins there at the background, the vegetation in the middle ground, and some of this foliage that's in shadow in the foreground. We'll just lighten that a little bit because it's a little bit darker on both sides and we want to even up the toning just that little bit more. Now we're looking at the sky and I want that colour to reflect in the water. Notice how the water's got a lot of tannin in it. It's looking a little bit dark. So using the vivid light, just tone it down a little bit with the opacity, and then we just brush in very, very carefully. We just want a hint of blue which matches the hint of blue in the sky, because you know the old saying, the colour of the sky is always reflected in the water. And unfortunately, when I shot this panorama, the foreground was in shadow, and therefore I didn't get enough blue in the water that I wanted. But we can add that in with a little bit of brushwork now with the right colour on vivid light. It's looking pretty good. Just a little bit more along here. And we can see now how lovely that reflection, it simulates the reflection in the sky. Next thing is the water. It's nice and white. We just want to highlight it a touch more. The water is actually the hero of our subject. It's a beautiful panorama and our eyes go to the water. And now I'm just going to go into the yellows because some of the water has got too much yellow in it. You can see that if I change the hue, it doesn't alter the water that much. So I need to actually lower the saturation, then have a look at my hue and maybe even brighten it a bit more. No, that's looking okay. All right, so I'll fill that mask with black. Then I'll go and change my mode to normal. Bring it up around about 100%. Yeah, there we go. As I brush that in, I can see that water. There's not so much yellow in it now. It looks more natural. Flatten that. That image is looking pretty good. A little bit more vivid light on the overall water and the subject itself, just to highlight those shadow details. Now, something interesting. I love the pink in the sky with vivid light, and just watching my opacity very carefully. I think 8's going to be okay actually. I'm going to brush in the light that actually is there in the clouds. I just want to highlight it a touch more. So I'm using a very, very delicate mauvey pink. Not too much. That's looking okay. Make a copy. Now I go into my Nick collection. I go down to Vivisa. I'm going to add a little bit of structure into the clouds. I usually overdo it because I've made a mask. Well, I will make a mask now because I had a copy. And you'll see that Vivisa is going to actually overdo the whole image. Looks terrible. So now we add a mask. We fill that with black. We go across to our brush tool in the normal mode, up around the 80% mark. And then we carefully brush in the tops of the mountains because they're a little bit misty, and the clouds, and that's looking very good. And you can see when I alter the opacity level that about 80% is good. Flatten that. That's looking okay. Not much more I can do with this image. I think it's, whoops, I've put the wrong marquee tool on there. That's the elliptical. I want the rectangle. I'm going to crop it and I'll show you why. A little bit off the bottom and a bit bigger amount off the top. I'm going to crop this. Then when I resize it, I'm actually going to change the peripherals a little bit and make it higher. So back to my 42-inch width, which I like. Then I'm going to just make the height that little bit bigger. And you can see what I've done is stretched the mountains a little bit, not so much sky, and it's evened up the image. There is a good amount of middle ground compared to the foreground and the sky. That's much more balanced. Just going to carefully tone up the reds in the sky. Then I'll fill that with black, and just that part of the image I'll touch in a little bit more. Because it is nearly dusk, there is lovely warmth floating about in this photograph, and we just want to highlight that a bit more. Finally, in a vivid light, drop my opacity. I'm just going to once more, with a bright white brush, highlight the foreground. Put a stroke around it, 2 pixels on the inside. Let's have a look at this image. That is absolutely beautiful, and that's the way I saw that. 8 images, the Cuillins at Sligachan. Save it in the same folder that our other images are, and that is the way Scotland looks when the sun is shining and it's the end of the day. It's just lovely. Maximum large file. That is a beautiful image. One you could be proud of if you shot that. Join me again as I will look at another panoramic image somewhere else in the world, very near in the future. So stay tuned, and thank you for watching today.